When America's system of political asylum works correctly, people who have suffered atrocities can find a safe haven in the U.S. to begin new lives. But when that same system is manipulated, some fear political asylum can be used by dangerous people to enter the U.S. legally. KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma joins me now with information she's gathered about the path some Somalis are taking to asylum in the United States and the concerns it's raising. So, Amitha, first of all, how large is the Somali community in San Diego?
There are about between 18 and 20,000 Somalis in San Diego. Many of them came in the 1990s through a huge influx of refugees under the U.S. refugee program, and they were escaping civil war, which is still the longest-running civil war in the post-colonial era in Somalia. It's very violent. It still is today. Villages were pillaged. There were armed gangs who were ruling, complete anarchy, and so they flew here and they settled into San Diego. They've been somewhat successful, quite successful. A lot of people have bought businesses, they're raising families, but they do have some challenges. Assimilation is one challenge. The second challenge is a high unemployment rate. There's a 40 to 50% unemployment rate.
For people who don't know where Somalis are from, where is the country located?
Somalia is in East Africa. It's in the Horn of Africa, around the southern east tip.
Okay. Well, Amitha, federal agents kind of shared with you their concerns about some of the asylum seekers who have come to the United States through the ports of entry in Mexico. What were they saying?
The concern stems from the route and the cost. They say that many Somalis are traveling from Somalia to Kenya, where they receive fake passports. From Kenya, they fly to Cuba on those fake passports. From Cuba, they travel by boat or plane to Central America, usually Panama. From Panama, they are taken by truck by human smugglers up to Guatemala, into Mexico, where they turn themselves in to Mexican immigration officials. Those officials take their picture, take their name, the name that they've given them, without verifying that that's their name, according to federal agents, and they give them what's called an expulsion document. That document says they're there illegally, but they're free to travel. They then travel to Tijuana, walk across the border, and ask for asylum.
What about the 9/11 Commission's request that people have real ID?
Well, therein lies one of the red flags for federal agents. They're saying that that expulsion document, because it's not been independently verified, should not serve as a real ID. Now, it should also be said that the federal agents say that a majority of these asylum claims by Somalis are legitimate, and they do have authentic identification, but there are others who do not, and those are the ones whom they are concerned about. The second issue is the cost of this route that they've taken to Mexico runs anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000. So they are wondering where the financing is coming for these trips, and there is worry that they could be financed by al-Shabaab, the terror group in Somalia.
Why is that group a concern for the United States?
Because that group is actively recruiting operatives from the United States and has also threatened to attack the United States. 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, when President Barack Obama was about to be sworn in, they threatened to disrupt those ceremonies. So the U.S. government is worried about this particular group, and they've got links to al-Qaeda.
So you talked to local Somalis about recruitment by al-Shabaab here?
I talked to them about recruitment in general by al-Shabaab. They said, you know, they haven't seen any evidence of it here in San Diego, but we did have a man who is a native San Diegan by the name of Jihad Mustafa. He is not Somali. He's believed to be married to a Somali woman, and federal prosecutors have said that he is in Somalia fighting alongside al-Shabaab.
Well, what evidence is there that that al-Shabaab has been successfully recruiting in San Diego?
Well, there is a man who was indicted in Texas. His name is Mohammed Dakhani, and the U.S. government has accused him of having ties to terrorism. He is a Somali, and he is believed to have smuggled quite a few people from Mexico into the U.S. There is another guy from Pennsylvania who is accused of smuggling 300 Somalis from Mexico into the U.S. A number of them are believed to be members of al-Shabaab.
Okay, well, I know you're going to continue to cover this story. Thank you very much, Amitha Sharma.
Thank you.